Hey everyone, so today we're making this Mediterranean style, I would say, orange flavored cake. It's gluten-free and dairy-free and completely delicious. And I made like a mini cake version of this. So we're starting off with creaming our butter and sugar. So I have some dairy-free stalk, the fluffy cake in the tub butter. Oh, and that one's a harder block one as well, so I've got a mixture. And that's 225 grams of that. And I'm getting that into my KitchenAid mixer. But if you have a hand mixer or something, you could definitely use that too. So once you've got the butter added, add some granulated or caster sugar, either way. And I'm using white sugar, and I'm using 225 grams of sugar as well. And then once they're done, you can cream them. So yeah, I made a 3 layer 12 centimeter cake. So it's quite a small one, just because I only had a small gathering. So I didn't want loads of extra cake. And I found one way that I enjoy making cake recently is to do these kind of miniature cakes, because then I get to still do like a full cake design, that minus having loads and loads of excess cake. I only had, let's see, like 6 people around. So this was enough cake for 6 people. And then I don't have loads and loads of extra cake after the gathering. So once I've got that creamed, I'm going to add the rest of my ingredients. So I'm starting off with some flour. So I'm using gluten-free self-raising flour by Dove's Farm, but use whatever you have. And again, I'm doing 225 grams of that. Then to that, I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of xanthan gum and a teaspoon of baking powder. The xanthan gum to bind the ingredients and make it taste, well, have a texture more like a normal gluten cake. And then the baking powder, obviously, just to help it rise a little bit, even though it has self-raising flour. For the gluten-free baking, I find that adding that extra teaspoon of baking powder makes all the difference. And once I've added those, I'm just going to try and mix them in kind of into the flour so that they combine. Oh, and also a pinch of salt. Just to try and evenly distribute them amongst the flour. And then for the rest of the ingredients. So next we have eggs, and I'm doing 4 eggs. And I dropped a bit of eggshell in there, so now I have to try and get it out, which is why I usually like to crack my eggs into a separate bowl. But I clearly made that mistake on this day and should have just done it into a separate bowl. These are medium eggs too, but so if you're doing large eggs, you might just want 3. Then I'm going to zest 1 orange. Well, I think I did most, yeah, did I think I did most of the orange, but this is quite a large orange, so 1 orange if you have a normal sized orange. And then once I've finished zesting it, I'm also going to squeeze out the juices into a separate bowl. try not to get too much of the white. I do get a little bit of the white at points. Because the more of the white part that you get, the more bitter in flavour it is. So ideally get mostly the orange. Just use my spoon to get some of that dust out of the grater. Also trying to make sure you have unwaxed oranges and give them a wash before you zest them. This was an unwaxed and organic one that I also obviously gave it a wash. So here I'm just squeezing out some of the juices too. This was a super flavorful orange, it was really good. Normally you might want one of the juicer things, but because this orange was just so juicy, there was so much juice that came out, so I didn't even use all the juice that came out, and I just squeezed it with my hands. So in the end, I used about half of the juice that came out of that orange, but for a normal orange, I'd say all the juice. And I just try and get the excess off the spoon, and then we can get that mixed through. So into the sun mixer it goes. Then while that mixes, I can clean out the area a little bit too. So I'm about to put that on to clean and to mix, and then I can kind of clear some of the area and make sure your oven's preheated to about 175 degrees Celsius as well. And yeah, get the cake pans out, get everything prepped, ready for it to go into the oven. Oh, I also forgot to add a teaspoon of vanilla, so I do that now. So I've just sped up the mixing process here. I have my whisk attachment on my KitchenAid. Just scraping down the edges here, making sure none of the ingredients are getting really stuck to the edge, making sure it's all mixed in very properly. So I felt inspired to do this cake because I was doing a Mediterranean theme night for Eurovision actually. That just kind of ended up that way. I wanted to do this theme anyway, and then Eurovision was coming around and I figured I'd pop the two together since it kind of goes. So I had lots of like kind of lemon themed food. In the end, I went with mostly Greek food, so I did Greek gyros for dinner with some tzatziki sauce, some salad, some lemon rice. So that's the cakes coming out of the oven. I covered them with cling film and let them cool down. And then as they're cooling, I moved on to make the Swiss meringue buttercream. So yeah, that's just them again. So for that, I've mixed my sugar and egg whites, and I'm just heating them on a double boiler on the hob. That's 5 egg whites and 250 grams sugar, I believe. I can link the recipe for it below though. And then you want to get it to the right temperature. And once it's at the right temperature, you can whisk it out of the double boiler in your. I've got it in my KitchenAid. So we're just going to mix that until the egg whites have kind of cooled down and we've got a stiff peak. But I will link the recipe to the Swiss meringue buttercream below, and then I just change it to make it dairy free. So I just use dairy free butter, and I always use a stalk block butter for this, and it works a dream. So I'm just kind of checking the peak here. We've got a nice stiff peak. As you can see, it doesn't even detach, and I tested it with my finger as well. So to that, I'm going to add my butter. I don't measure the butter. I just add a tablespoon at a time until I get to the consistency I like. But on the recipe I'll link, there is an amount that you can, use. But I always find that it actually takes a little bit less butter than it says. So I actually just kind of wing it. And I've made this so many times that I kind of know when it's coming together as well. So that's kind of a practice makes perfect thing, but I will link the recipe below, like I said, in case you haven't made it before, because it can be a little bit tricky. I've only had it go wrong once, and it split on me, and I could not save it. And I think it was for someone's birthday cake as well that I was making. And so it was a disaster. But other than that, I've never had it split on me, and I've made it loads and loads of times. I think that time, well, I didn't use the store-bought butter, and I think the egg white was too hot and the butter was too cold. So again, I'm just adding a tablespoon at a time. And I've got it on quite a high speed here. I think it's on like 7, 8. And for each tablespoon you put in, you want to make sure it mix this through completely before you add the next tablespoon too. Um, Again, I think to kind of stop it splitting, I think that the time that it went wrong as well, I was kind of rushing. And it's one of those things that when you rush, everything seems to go wrong. But this time it turned out perfectly, and it normally does. I used to always have to make this with a hand mixer because that's all I had, and it can make your arm very, very tired. So do bear that in mind. But here you can see it slowly coming together. So I've kind of slow down the video to normal time so that you can see it coming together. And as it begins to kind of look quite thick, that's when you know it's done. And I pull it up here, and you can see it all stays nicely on there. And I've got a knife as well out just to show you how thick it is. So next step is to take the cakes out the cake tin. This is actually the next day. So I left the buttercream in the fridge overnight and left the cakes to cool, and then came back to it the next day on the day that I was having my dinner day and my dinner party. So I'm taking these cakes off the cake pan. I'm just push them out and then cutting off the bottom. They're a little bit sticky because of the hot orange, and then I'm just leveling them out as well. So cut forward to the last one, and I'll show you me leveling this one out. So just kind of cutting off the dome top to it, and then munching on it because I was hungry, and the cake is delicious. I can affirm that. And when it was baking, oh, it smelled delicious. So there you can see it looks quite flat. I decided to take a little bit off this bottom one. It was quite flat, but I cut a little bit off it. And then we can get to filling. So I'm going to fill my piping bag with the buttercream. I'm just using buttercream on the middle. And I'm going to use some of the buttercream on the outside as well, because this is a fondant painted with the buttercream. But for the middle, I'm just using the buttercream as a colorette can. And then I'll color it for the outside. So here we've got my piping bag fill. I've just cut a hole at the bottom. I haven't even got a piping tip on, and I'm just going to fill it up. I'm doing it quite carefully, but it really doesn't need to be done carefully because we're going to cover it with fondant anyway. So there we go. Add the layer, and then just rinse and repeat for the next layer as well. To be honest, you could probably just check it on with a spoon. You probably don't even need to pipe it. but the piping bag will come in handy for the next step. There we go, just fill it up again. Of course, you could do a filling too. You could do like maybe like a lemon curd filling if you like lemon curd. I'm not a huge fan of lemon. But there's lots of flavors you could do with an orange cake that would be delicious and very like Mediterranean theme. Then I'm just going to chuck a bunch on the top. And I'm just going to do a bit of a crumb coat before I put on the fondant, just flatten it out a bit to make the fondant a bit easier to put on. I'm definitely not a professional, and I'm a lot better when it comes to buttercream than I am when it comes to fondant. I don't work with fondant that much, so I wanted to make it as easy a base as I could before I added the fondant. I think if you froze the cake too, that would make it very easy, I reckon, to put the fondant on top. But I'm not 100% sure. Because this is quite a small cake, it does make it a little bit easier to put the fondant over it. So I'm just basically like putting a bit of the buttercream on it or the outside just to give it a bit of a flatter edge, like I say, to put the fondant on top of. And filling in the areas where we kind of piped around as well. I don't have any structural dowels or anything in this cake because it is quite small, and I'm not too worried about that. But if you are doing a bigger version of this cake, you would probably need to double the recipe and then put probably a dowel through the middle to make sure it doesn't slide around because that would be very disappointing if you made it and it looked gorgeous and it like the top slid off or something. So once that's done, I'll pop the cake aside and roll out the fondant. So I just have a plain white fondant for this. You could also do maybe like a yellow or something, would look cool, but I'm going for that kind of the typical kind of Mediterranean pattern that you think of on like plates and stuff with the white and the blue kind of flowers and everything. I'll link my inspiration for it below, but I was inspired by a Pinterest video um where I saw someone use this method. I don't know who originally did it. Let me see if I can find the person that I found that did it. Let's see. Hmm. I'm not 100% sure who. I can't actually see who my inspiration was for it on here on Pinterest. But either way, I saw it on Pinterest first, so someone definitely did it first. And I'm just imitating them. So I'm just trying to roll this fondant out until it's big enough to go over the cake, honestly. And I have icing sugar down on the table to stop it sticking to it. I know there's a few methods you can do for fondant, like you can cut out the top, put that on, and then do the sides, or you can do it the way that I'm going to do it, which is just to drape it over. And to be honest, like I say, I'm not really very experienced in fondant as much as I am buttercream, so I don't really know what I find the easiest, but this is just what I did today. Well, on this day. So I kind of looked at it and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to make it a little bit thinner just to make my life easier to get it over the top. And this is just a fondant pre-made from Tesco that I use. And I'm just going to place it on top of the cake and hope for the best. So I kind of just place it down and then accept that there's going to be a few seams that I need to kind of fix up. So I think I go with 3 seams. Or was it 4? I think 3, yeah. And then I kind of just place it around that, and then I'm going to cut those off and then smooth it out a bit. So I just get the knife, cut this excess off. Do that on all the edges. I do accidentally pull a little bit too much off on that one, but that's easily fixed. Full speed up me fixing this. So I do the same on this bit, cut it off, cut the edges off around the plate. Please let me know if you know a better method for fondant. I'd probably definitely need a better method for it, but this is the one that I'm using on this day. And then this last bit, or is this the corner that I messed up on? Yeah, this is the one that I messed up on a little bit, which you can't see because my head's in the way, but I just get a little bit of the icing and patch it there. And in the end, it turns out absolutely fine. And even so, I'm going to cover it with buttercream anyway, so a lot of the mistakes you won't notice. So I do smooth it out, but a lot of these mistakes, honestly, become barely noticeable. So I cut off the rest of the excess, and I have a tool that's kind of useful for flattening the icing. And I also get a bowl of some water just to help join the seams up. So here's my little flattening tool, which I use. And I just use some water to pinch these seams together a little bit better. So I'll just speed up me kind of fixing this fondant base. So it's really important if you're doing this method to make sure you really do cut off all the excess. Otherwise you'll have a massive seam that you're going to try and flatten out. It's easier if there's just not much there at all. I do flatten out the top a bit too. Try and give it some sharper edges. Like I say, it will be mostly covered with buttercream anyway, so it's not going to be super noticeable. But you want it to be pretty good before you start piping it on there, because it still will be a little bit noticeable if it's completely a mess. So that you can see that seam before, that's now a little bit better. So once we've got that all done, which I've had finished now, and you can see there's a little bit of a seam but not so noticeable. I'm going to get the rest of the buttercream into a bowl, or pretty much the rest of it, and then we need to get it to the colour that we want it. So to get to the colour that I'm doing today, I'm starting with some blue food gel colour. Use the gel, not the liquid. The liquid tends to look a mess. And so will the gel at first, but you need to really mix it through, and then it will not look grainy. It can look grainy, but you have to make sure that you really mix it through. And when you use the liquid, I find that it always looks grainy. I don't know if that's just the dairy-free stuff, or whether that's just for all icing that it will look grainy without the food gel coloring instead of the liquid food color. But anyway, I'm starting with some blue, and I've just got my little offset spatula there, mixing it through. In the end, I do resort to a spoon, it just is a little bit easier. Obviously, depending on what colour you want it, I mean, you can colour it whatever colour you want. So depending on what colour you want it, or depending on what colours you want to add into this. But if you're going for the blue like me, then I pretty much use the whole tube of this blue food colour in the end of the process. At first, it kind of gives this aqua blue colour, which is a really pretty blue colour, but not what we're going for. So then I'm going to add in a bit of this black food colour, just to make it a bit deeper of a colour. So I cut off the end of the tube with my knife. And then just add a few drops of that in. Be careful with how much you add of the black. Obviously, you don't want it to be too overpowering. So again, I'm just going to mix through this black like we did with the blue. And you can already tell that it's making it a bit of a deeper colour, a bit more of a kind of darker, more like navier blue. So mix that through. I'll speed that up. I do add a little bit. I do switch to the spoon here and mix it through just to make my life easier. And then I do also decide to add some of this purple food colour in to again give it more of a darker, deeper hue. And more of a, again, a bit more of a navy colour. So again, I'll just cut the top off of this food gel colour and add a few drops of it in. Again, try not to add too much because we still want it to be blue coloured, but just to deepen it a bit. So once we've added that in, we'll just mix that through as well. And then you can see it's kind of deepening the colour a bit. So again, I'll speed that up. And I just keep adding drops of everything in until I find that I'm getting to the colour that I like. So I add some more blue in, and then mix that through, and then just, yeah, I keep going until I think, okay, we're getting to a colour that I like now. The more you mix it through as well, the colour does change a little bit, so it's just getting to the point that you like it. And as you can see here, it's kind of grainy, but the more you mix it through, it won't be that grainy colour anymore. It will be like a smooth, better cream colour. So just add more of that blue through. To be fair, if you did it with your mixer, it probably wouldn't go grainy at all. It's just doing it by hand. It does go a bit grainy until you've thoroughly mixed it through. So I kind of pick it up here and mix it through just to make it a bit easier on my arm. You can see my shadow mixing it on the table. And we're kind of getting to that colour, and I'm like, no, I think we need to add in some more food colour. So I add in kind of the remaining bit of the blue. Mix that through, just keep mixing, mixing and mixing until you get to the place you like. I add some more black in, a little bit more purple at points as well. So this is me again to this point where you can see it's not too grainy yellow anymore, but we're not quite at the colour that I exactly love. So now I'm looking at it like, what colour do I need to add to make it more of the colour that I want? It's a very hard process. Of course, if you just wanted the standard bloom, it would be a lot easier of a process. You could just add the bloom and mix it through. So I kind of look at it against the cake and I'm like, nope, we're not at the colour I want yet. So I'm just going to add some more food colour into it. So at this point, I'm kind of adding in the last slide of food colour that I really add. So a little bit more of that purple. And then we're about at the colour I like. So I'll show you that in a second. And yeah, you'll see that it's a pretty colour. And so we start adding it to the cake. So this is the final colour that we get to. And you can see how smooth the buttercream looks at this point too. So once you've got to whatever colour you want, I would get it into a piping bag with a very small piping tip. You could just cut a small hole in the end of your piping bag if you don't have a piping tip, but I use quite a small piping tip to do this. I could have gone with an even smaller piping tip, to be fair. Um, and here I'm just painting it on. You can't actually see, but I'll move it around in a second so you can see probably. So I've got my piping bag and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to pipe on the shape of the flowers. Use a paintbrush to spread it out, and then pipe on some stems and some leaves and some tree bits as well. So just getting to the point, you can freehand it basically. So like I say, I'll move the camera around in a second so that you can see how I'm freestyling it. But really, you can take inspiration from any kind of pattern that inspires you that looks quite painting like. And abstract. I wouldn't pick anything too precise because buttercream can sometimes not do as it's told. So I'll move the camera around now. So this is it kind of part way done. So I've got some sidewood flowers, a big flower there, some leaves and stems and all sorts coming out. And this is just me freestyling it. So I've got it in the bag and I'm just going to pipe kind of a rough shape of a flower on. Grab my paintbrush. It's a food safe paintbrush, obviously not one you've had paint on. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then I'm just going to spread it out and you can kind of paint it downwards like that. And it kind of spreads the blue colour around. Excuse the mess in the background from the baking process. I think everyone knows that when it comes to baking, it can create quite a mess. So I'm just doing the inner flower area now, kind of like like a centimetre or so inward. Like I say, it's better cream. It's not exact. Painting that out, and then I'll do like the centre of the flower too. Like that, and then you can just use your paintbrush to kind of spread it around, and then ta-da, you have a flower. And you can do like some pretty little patterns coming out of the flower. That will work. Anything along those lines. But like a nice pretty touch. Oh, my head's in the way nicely. And you can do some bits so they go onto the top, and like I say, just some leafy bits as well, like this, and just kind of spread it out. Kind of reminds me of a grapevine, that pattern bit too. So this bit is sped up a little bit. So, but take your time with it when you're doing it. It's more of an artistic expression, this version of a cake. It doesn't not need to be perfect. It can really be anything you want it to be. So I'll move on to show you me doing the top bit as well, just so that it's from the top you can really see what's going on. But here you can see that I'm just dragging this flower onto the top kind of area, so that I've already got some bits on the top by the time I get round to doing the top. So here we are on the top bit now. So I've already got, like I say, some leaves and a few flowers and stems and bits on the top. And I'm just going to paint a big flower in the center of it. Doing the same thing. So I've got a big outline. I'll spread that through. By this point, I'm really getting the hang of it because I've done the rest of the cake. I think it's good to do the top last, as that's kind of the bit that's most noticeable. And by this point, you know, the sides you can always pick one side being the back, but the top's always going to be the top. And then doing the kind of middle bit of the flower. And then adding like the center to the flower. Like that. And then again, I'm just going to freehand the rest of the top, add some swirls and stuff around until it feels like it's kind of full enough. Because right now it looks a little bit empty on the top, especially compared to the rest of the cake. So add that swirl there, add a few swirls around, drag them kind of down onto the edge of the cake. It's one of those things that mid-process, you're not sure it's turning out perfectly, but by the end, it really comes together. And you could also add some other decorations onto the top, especially if you're doing kind of like a Mediterranean theme. You could add like a lemon or a couple of oranges onto the top. Or if it's a birthday, obviously you might have like a birthday sign in the top. Um, so you can add other decorations on there too. Some foliage would look really pretty, whether it's some faux flowers or some real edible flowers that you could add on top as well would look really nice and really elegant. I did originally want to put some flowers in, but trying to figure out like some edible flowers was proven difficult. I've seen people do those pineapple slices as flowers as well, and I think that would look really nice too. Anything along that lines would look really nice on this kind of style of cake. And as you can see now at this point, you can't even notice any imperfections in the fondant. So it really didn't have to be perfect. So that's the top done, the whole cake done. So I'll show you a few images of it kind of finished. Here's me kind of spinning it around over on the top of a counter. So it's still a little bit dirty here, but I do clean it up before I serve it at the dinner party. Here's it kind of when I'm serving it to other people. As you can see, all nicely done. And there's the center as well. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you try it and love it. Thanks. See you next time. Bye.